Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you have joined us today. A little odd time for us, but we're excited to talk to Corinne. So, our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. HPH goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non dogmatic way. HPH affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal. Oh, shoot. Sorry. And members. So we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. And sorry about that phone call. So welcome, Lisa, Corinne, Elizabeth, and everybody else. We're so glad you're here today.
Thank you
I'm
very much.
very excited. Corinne, thank you. Corinne's book, which is Tears for a Golden Butterfly, is written about her experience with her beautiful son. And I am just very honored to have the lotus candle that Corinne gifted me from his incredible service. And so, Corinne, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please tell us a little bit about Julian and your journey.
Well, yeah, Julian is my only child. He was born in 1994 on the 16th of January. The first moment I looked into his eyes, I will never forget, until the afterlife because it was such an overwhelming experience. I felt so much love for him immediately, and this love was so much larger than my little physical body. It was really, I felt very expanded immediately. I never had such an experience before, and I've learned now through talking to a lot of people that this probably indicates that we were together in other lives, and we immediately like recognized each other as soulmates, as they call it. He was a very or he is, I should say, because I'm still in connection with him, but as a child he was very curious, adventurous, and very, very sweet and empathic. He was the kind of kid you didn't have to give a lot of punishment when he digressed or did something that was not okay, because immediately you just a look in his eyes and he knew and he wasn't going to do it again. He was very, very intelligent, and that showed also, yeah, not always in his grades, but it did show in later in his life when he had graduated from college with a degree in business administration and management from San Diego State University. And then after that, he had a very successful career, first with Enterprise Rent a Car. He advanced really quickly, getting like bigger branches to basically run. And he was very smart with numbers, but also with people. His social intelligence was just incredible. I often would say to him, you're smarter in that sense than I was. Maybe at his age, definitely, but even now, I think he just had such insight, such a keen observer. And yeah, so he was really, we bonded immediately, and sadly, his dad and I separated when he was 3, which was unfortunate, I think, because it really hurt him being such a sensitive soul. And then even more misfortune and actually tragedy happened when his dad became seriously ill with pancreatic cancer and passed when Julian was just 13. So at the time, we were just mom and son. And at first, it was, of course, really hard for him. But we grew also, like, we were like, yeah, I mean, we were the only people left, of our little family. He has a half sister, Rachel, and he felt very close to her always, but she lived in the U.S., so that was quite far away. And his dad was American, so that kind of explains his strong connection with the U.S. and that's where he studied. And I visited him, yeah, a couple of times a year. He came over here. We always took trips together. Yeah, he got to pick where we were going, and then we went. And yeah, I loved him to the moon and back. I mean, it's like a cliche, but it's yeah. I mean, that's. And I've just been yeah. Of course, what happened, back in 2023 when I discovered that he was trying to yeah, I guess medicate himself for his mental health issues with all kinds of drugs. I didn't know about that, so that was a completely yeah, like a total shock to me and also to his friends. He was very good apparently at yeah, like disguising this from us. And later on, he has told me after his passing that he really didn't want to disappoint me. He was really like, he wanted me to be happy, and this was just something he couldn't share. And yes, in a way, I feel, of course, as any parent, incredibly sad that he's not here with me anymore. But I've learned also to trust that there's a higher meaning in this, yeah, this what we call early passing, I guess. The question is it early? I mean, we humans, we have all these ideas about, that everybody should stay here on Earth for, yeah, at least 80 years or something. But I think maybe that's not true, and I think we as Julian's loved ones, we have learned so much from his passing, and that's reflected in the book. And yeah, this book is just like a first book because I intend to write more about everything that is still evolving. I continue to learn about what Suzanne Giesemann calls the greater reality. And yeah, it's like it has been a journey of deep grief, but also a journey of immense spiritual growth and awakening, and also at times, and definitely now, I feel more at peace with myself and with the world, yeah, than I've ever been. And Julian is my guide, and that has been shown to me by his signs, by his messages to me, by our automatic writing sessions. But it also is shown in different readings that I've had. For instance, the reading with you, Lisa, but I've had other readings with a shamanistic healer in Glastonbury this summer. And all these different, yeah, people who are spiritually connected are saying the same thing. So I mean, you can't make this up, and it gives me goosebumps every time that I have these meetings, and I'm just guided to these people too, I'm not I don't feel like I'm really seeking them out, I just trust. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Corinne, what I find fascinating about you and having met you and your book is many of us were on our path to learning this spirituality before our children were even born to us. For example, Elizabeth, beautiful Elizabeth, who started this group in the first place with her children, Morgan and Chelsea, had time in India, had time with her yoga practice. I know you in your book share that you too were a yogi prior to this happening with Julian. But what's so fascinating is very similar to Suzanne Giesemann and Eben Alexander. You had an entirely other facet of yourself, which I find fascinating. I'd love for you to be able to explain that to our guests here.
Yes, well, I guess my childhood was really characterized by a really strong connection to nature and immense curiosity about everything. I mean, I know my mom, she got really, frustrated with all the questions that I would ask that she could not answer. So, and this curiosity led me to, yeah, to be, a curious kid. So study hard, So I became a psychologist because I was very interested in the human mind. And then, yeah, sort of, I guess, yeah, by coincidence, I was also interested in both the science part and the clinical part. So I became a scientist. I'm a professor of forensic psychology, which is also kind of odd because Suzanne Giesemann often makes the comparison with, the preponderance of the evidence. And it's the same as forensic work, It's not like you can prove anything 100%, but it's like if all the evidence is pointing in one way, then yeah, you got your conclusion there. So that's my forensic work. And I'm also a clinician, a clinical psychologist. So I do assessments and I've done psychotherapy in the past. But I was also always really interested in the big questions like why are we here on Earth? What happens after the body doesn't breathe anymore? What is consciousness? What are feelings? What is happening in the body? So when I was a student, I would I tried out everything under the sun. I went to like different churches from Catholic to Protestant. I did Zen tea ceremonies. I did yoga. I yeah, ultimately studied Rudolf Steiner's work in anthroposophy. I tried all these things because I was just curious and I was looking for answers. I didn't really find them until I met my later, yeah, who became ultimately my spiritual teacher, which was a Dutch man called Alexander Smit, and he's from the Advaita Vedanta tradition. And that's actually, yeah, kind of a mystical school that belongs to the Hindu tradition. And it's basically non-dualist philosophy. So it's really about everything Suzanne talks about too, about we all come from source, we are source, we are not separate from source. That's just an illusion that's created because we are in a body and we get these conditionings from our childhood. But basically, if we can reconnect with that, yeah, with our beingness, with source, with yeah, the the divine, then we are at peace and there are no problems. And that was exactly the teachings that Alexander gave us. So, in a way, I feel I was somehow prepared. I mean, you can never really prepare for the loss of your child, I think. And I never in my entire life had I even, you know, thought about this happening, you know, not one single moment. But when it happened, it was really interesting. And I described that in the book too, that when the first moment I knew that Julian had left the earthly plane, there were these two emotions. One was this deep sense of grief and loss and pain, but there was also this sense of total peace. Like, and I know Elizabeth has also described this, this exact, or maybe not exact, but this similar type of experience. So I find this really interesting because to me, it sort of felt like at that moment that I was able to acknowledge and recognize that Julian was and is a soul, and that his soul is sovereign, is yeah, has its own path, you know. And I've been his mom, and I'm still his mom. I mean, he still calls me mama, you know, when we do sessions together. But yeah, so I don't know, you know, I don't know. Your life goes a certain way, and I think if you're open, and I think I'm a very open, sensitive person who wants to explore and find out, and then you get these opportunities to meet people like Alexander Smith, and I was yeah with him for yeah, from like 1986 till 1998 when he passed. And I learned so much, you know, we did meditations and retreats and yeah, he exposed us to lots of, you know, knowledge from, you know, also from Chinese Zen tradition. And he was just really a great teacher. And if you were in his presence, you would immediately feel, at least I did, this immense peace coming over you, as if, yeah, all your problems were gone immediately. It was like his state of being was like this, yeah, his energy or his field just exuded this peace. And yeah, I just feel very grateful that I met him and that he taught me so much about, yeah, who we all really are and who I am. Yes.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've had an incredibly successful academic career, Corinne. How do you reconcile your spirituality with Western science? And how do your colleagues feel about
Mm.
this new Corinne?
Yes, yes, good question. Well, I was never hiding my spiritual side. You know, so even before Julian's passing, I would talk about it, and people knew about this. And I even have a colleague who also knew Alexander Smith. So, but of course, now things have kind of yeah, you could say exploded, or, you know, it's really out there now, and especially with the book. It's very interesting. I don't see any conflict between spirituality and science. I think they are just like two sides of a coin, for lack of a better metaphor, but they need each other. You know, it's the same that the way I feel about Western medicine and more, yeah, you could say Eastern approaches that focus a lot on prevention, you know, like Chinese medicine. I see them as complementary. I see them as, yeah, they are all true in their own way. And what I notice is that if I share my experiences, which I've been doing from the start, you know, like, Julian's after death communications to me started fairly quickly after his celebration of life. So that was like beginning of November, so like 2 years ago. And I told one of my longtime fellow professors, Harald Merkelbach, who's a really, empiricist, but I told him about these experiences. He came to my office and we just chatted. And of course, he gave me a big hug and he felt really, he attended the celebration. We've been very close since, yeah, our early 20s. So I shared this with him and I said, I don't know what this is, Harold, but it's something that I don't understand and I want to look into it. And he was like, yes, of course. That's you, that's the way you are. And this is what I've encountered. Of course, there have been a few people who will say, well, that's just a belief, or, good if it helps you. But most people, maybe because I'm such a, I have like more than 200 scientific publications in regular scientific journals. So and people know that. So they feel like, well, if she's exploring this, well, maybe there's something in it. And what I'm also noticing is, and I also tried to work that into the book, because I really started also to look into the scientific literature about research on all these topics: after death communications, near death experiences. There's so much out there. And the thing is, most people in regular academia, of course, there are exceptions, but most people don't know about this. It's like they can dismiss it, but they've never really gone into the literature to find out what it was all about and if they're actually, yeah, if there is evidence and what it is like. And I think that's interesting that my own, yeah, innate curiosity will also bring me to the scientific literature on these topics. And of course, being a scientist, I can read this and I can also, give a judgment on the quality of the research, the design, the methodology. And I also talk about that in the book. And I intend to, yeah, to really keep doing that, to look at this literature and to see how we can bridge the gap between, yeah, so-called Western science and this whole area of yeah, of discovery, because that's how I see it. I see myself as I'm on an inner path of discovery. Some people look Discovery Channel, but I have these channels here and I'm discovering a lot. And I really like the metaphor that Suzanne Giesemann uses, that if you can like dial your frequency, your radio, your receiver to receiving the other side, receiving the other dimension, then I'm just, in awe what all I am discovering. I'm, getting in touch with my guides, I'm being led to different places on earth, and then I go there and then I have these really incredible experiences that bring me so much healing and give me so much hope for the world, really. And that's really how I think about my own path right now is, okay, I will do this. I'll keep discovering, but I really want to share it. And first with other parents, but also with other people, because I feel there is this other perspective, and people call it a paradigm shift. People call it all kinds of things, but it's really a completely other perspective than the materialist, that you are a body, you are your feelings, etc. Well, you're also a body, but you're also this in this other dimension. And if you can tap into that and experience that, your life is going to be so much easier. I mean, it's just amazing. And that's, I'm, I'm, I'm talking a lot about Suzanne Giesman because she has been my savior, really. I connected with her pretty soon after Julian's transition, and yeah, the way somehow I really connect with her and with her teaching methods, with her meditations. Somehow it just works for me, and I find her, yeah, what I really appreciate about her, she is so very generous with her time, with her, yeah, every time she shares her own discoveries. Yeah, she shares it with us, yeah, her students, if you want. And I just am so very grateful that yeah she came on my path. And I also went to Arthur Findlay College, which is basically the spiritualist science college of the world, I guess, which I've also found really awesome. And yeah, I I cannot see another path for me than just to explore this further and to be of service. Yes, in any way I can.
I love that your background brings such veracity to your newfound, well, not newfound, but your increased growth in spirituality with Julian. And I think that's what helps parents who have such difficult, not just parents, anyone, who's dealing with this deep, dark night of the soul when we're brought to awaken.
Yeah,
Um, this is why I feel your book and your story are so paramount to those who have such a difficult time believing, quote
yeah.
unquote.
And I understand that, and I never argue with people who feel like, yeah, they can't, imagine anything like this. I can totally understand that. But I just like Suzanne, I'll say, maybe you take like, yeah, a little sip of the divine every day and see what it brings you. She has this technique. If just 3 minutes, you can find it on her YouTube channel and just explore. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work. But especially, I think if you're in very deep grief, I see grief, and especially deep grief, so losing a partner very early, or losing a child, or I mean, we're not really losing them, but losing them in this earthly realm. So then your heart breaks, literally, it's just breaking. So your heart opens, if you can allow it, of course, and that's another part of my mission, if you want to call it that, that we need to develop another way of dealing and communicating about death, in the Western world. And I know at Helping Parents Heal, that is, that's common knowledge, but I think so many people are so afraid of death, of dying. It's been kind of, yeah, put away. And in contrast, of course, to the Eastern religions, where after a person dies, yeah, they celebrate, they burn the body, and it's really like, yeah, the soul is going home. So I think if we could bring that to the Western world, and also I think to grieve more as a community, which of course we do in the Helping Parents Heal activities and conference. But that is so important. I found that so helpful. I'm always gathering with Julian's friends, with family. I talk about him all the time. He's not gone. He's right here. He knows everything that's going on in my life. And the same will go for you. Even if you think it's not so, it is. And It's very funny too. If you learn to see the signs and learn to communicate, oh my, this whole world opens up. The world becomes so big, it's not only here, but you're also there. And that can be also kind of, a bit unsettling at first, but after a while, you also get back here on Earth, Of course, everybody wants to join their kid at first and think, I don't want to be here anymore. What's the point? But that just settles. And I think the grief work, I mean, it's called work. And it feels like work because you have to ride those waves. You have to allow it. And only then will you rise like a phoenix from your ashes, really. And at least in our Western society, there's no place for grief. Yeah, you can go hide behind your curtains, but to make it more like something that you can also share with others, and I've been sharing all the time, also in conversations when people ask me how are you doing, I'll be very honest, and I've noticed that so many people I've known for years, and they told me for the first time about the very grave losses they suffered. Maybe they lost a sibling during childhood. And, there is, of course, there's so much people who lose beloveds, sometimes untimely. And that hits hard. That hits the heart. And if we can share that, it's half the burden. It's just going to be so much, and it also brings so much more love and peace to the world, it is this whole, yeah, if we can connect on that level and see each other's vulnerability and yes, each other's, yeah, deep sadness and frustration, then yes, I think then we can heal and make the world a better place than it is right now. And I applaud Elizabeth and also Irene, of course, and everything that you also, Lisa, and your colleague are doing for, because this organization is such a place that, yeah, that helps people heal and transform their grief into, yeah, something positive for the world.
And I love that you've explained the work of helping parents heal, in that our mission is different, in that we know that our children are alive. We know our children are with us. And along those lines, I would love to hear about some of your encounters with Julian from the other side and some of the amazing things he's shown you.
Do you have a couple of hours? I'll share one of the latest ones. Um, I was in Greece. I was nudged by Spirit to go to Greece. So first I went on a sailing trip for a week. Very daunting sailing trip. There were days where we had to sail for more than 12 hours and winds were strong. So we went from the island of Samos to Athens, and then I took a bus to Delphi to visit the oracle and all the ruins from antiquity. Amazing place, really strong earth energies, and that's why I had to go there to connect back with the earth. On my way back to Athens to catch another flight back to Amsterdam airport, I got an Uber and I was in the Uber and I told the chauffeur, the driver, I said, I'm flying KLM, so please put me, near the KLM counters there. And he said, yo, there's just one terminal, so okay. And he dropped me at the first stop. And KLM was not on the list. And I told him, I said, I don't think this is the right place you're dropping me off. But then again, yeah, he he was sure. He said, yeah, they're all here. It's fine. Okay. I step out of the car. I open the door. First thing I see is big billboards, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Now, mind you, this is the company Julian worked for 2.5 years. So I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, I understand now that this is the right place that I needed to be dropped off. And of course, I teared up a bit because I was going to argue with that driver. And then I knew he had put this idea in the driver's head, of course, because that's what they do. And I looked around, and actually, there was lots of, uh, markers for different. There was Avis, there was Hertz, but this was the only place where there was Enterprise. Okay, and he does this all the time. So in the summer we were in Cornwall, and I've never seen so many Enterprise vans on one holiday. It's ridiculous. What he also does is he manipulates butterflies, and mainly butterflies, sometimes also dragonflies, but mainly butterflies. His sign are the white cabbage butterflies. So what he will do is, to get my attention sometimes, yeah, apparently what I've read and learned is that the frequency they are in or living is very similar to the frequency insects operate. So it's really easy for them to manipulate insects if they want to. It takes some effort, but so what he does sometimes, he will, like one day, there was a butterfly that flew into my office, my home office, made a little round around my computer screen, sat on the right-hand corner of my computer screen, and then started to circle around my head, and then went out of the window again. I mean, you cannot make this up. Butterflies don't behave like that. This is, I've never seen anything like this. And I was just flabbergasted. And usually what happens after that, after those kinds of things, then he will put a thought in my head, what I call a telepathic message. I don't hear his voice, but I hear him. He comes with a message. And yeah, it's so many things. We like I said, we do these automatic writing sessions where I first meditate and I really connect to spirit. I'm in this expanded state of awareness. And then I just write down, say, hi, Julian, how are you today? And then he's always there. He manipulates my body in a certain way. So like he moves it a bit like this. And I can just communicate with him. I ask him what he's doing all the time, where he is now in this other dimension, which is actually also here. It's not like it's out there. No, it's just in another frequency. We can't see with our eyes or hear with our ears. So he's been talking a lot about what he's been doing. And I already told you he's my guide, and he told me this a long, long, long time ago. Yeah, like on All Souls Day, that's the 2nd of November, 2023, and he passed on the 27th of September that year. And at first I thought, what is this? You're my guide. I'm your guide now. This is what I heard when I was in the church. And then yeah, I did a reading this summer with a shamanistic healer, very experienced, 30 years of experience. And he didn't know anything about me. And well, the first thing he says, yeah, your son is here. And he's one of your main guides. And you have a mission, da 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 da. I won't go into that detail. So I'm getting so much like confirmation all the time that what I'm getting from Julian directly is also what I'm getting from other people who are able to connect with him. And that's like cross validation. I would call that in scientific terms. So yeah, it's just amazing. And at first you think, what is this? This can't be. I can't wrap my mind around this. But the more I read about it, the more I read about, the quantum field and all the experiments people like Lynn and other people have been doing. Rupert Sheldrake's work. There is so much out there. A lot of scientists have been studying these phenomena, yeah, for for years, 30 years. The first book on near-death experiences by Raymond Moody. He coined the term, and I read that after Julian's passing, and I thought, oh my God, this guy he was really far ahead of his time. I think he's 81 now. He's still, very interested in the topic, and he was a very skeptical person at first too. And I think that's good. Suzanne Giesemann, same way. She said, my left brain Navy commander mind couldn't fathom, didn't believe these things, but she still kept meditating and ultimately connected with her stepdaughter, Susan. So I feel, yeah, it is. I think we are up for a whole new era of discovery in this field because I just see how many people are on this path in different ways, of course, because there's so many different techniques you can use, to access the other frequency. So I'm
That's a
very,
great segue.
yeah.
Oh, good. What were you going to say, Elizabeth? I was going to say that's a great segue. You've mentioned automatic writing, you've mentioned yoga, you've mentioned your meetings with mediums, myself getting to be honored to be one of them. You've mentioned all your research, your meditations. What would you think would be the most pivotal um, avenue towards your transformation as a scientist in the certainty that Julian is still so with you?
um, I would say that the fact that I am able to live my life as a professor, as a colleague, as a friend, as a family member, in such a way that I'm not devastated. I'm not in any way, I mean, I grieve, and sometimes it will hit me, and I have to ride that wave and make space for it. But if I do that, I am at peace. And I think if I did not know for certain that I could connect with him anytime, that I would feel so lost, and I'm not. So that's proof for me that the connection is real, because otherwise I wouldn't feel this way. No way. And I've met many people, other parents, also here in the Netherlands, other parents who lost a child through, like Julian, overdosed or took their own life in another way. I'm not saying Julian purposefully overdosed. I don't know. The official, statement from the autopsy report is accidental overdose, and it's because you never know. So I think I've seen so many parents just in so much pain, in so much suffering, after many more years than me, I'm just 2 years down this road now, and I am able to be, yeah, loving and balanced and, kind and, uh, I mean, not always, but in general, and I see that those other people that I've met who don't have that kind of connection with their child across the veil, they are just in such deep, deep pain. And that's why I feel so strongly that if I can just help in some small way with this process to, yeah, then I will just be so fulfilled and yeah, and just I think that's really important because it's not only the parents who suffer. I see the siblings suffer, the grandparents, the friends, We have regular meetings with Julian's friends here in the Netherlands. He grew up here. And it's just so wonderful to just share the memories and to, make jokes and to play his music and to eat the food he loved. And yeah, and I know he's there, because then a couple of days later he'll appear in my meditation and he'll say something. Or I mean, he's not saying, he's just giving me the message like, yeah, and he gives a detail that's very specific. So I know he observed everything. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question, Corine, and I know that Lisa's doing a beautiful job, but I just have to say this after what you've said. We don't have a group in the Netherlands, and it would be
No,
wonderful
no, I
if
know.
you
Yes.
were interested in becoming an affiliate leader.
Oh, yes, definitely.
We have Jill who's on here who's telling us that her daughter transitioned recently, Julia, and she lives in Amsterdam. And so it would be wonderful to be able to
Yeah.
know that there's a group there either by Zoom or in person.
Oh,
And
yes.
Speak is pretty far from Amsterdam, but not
I
in the
know.
United
I
States
know.
terms. It's not,
Yeah, well, we
but
talked
again,
about yeah. Well, we talked about this in when I was in Phoenix at the third Helping Parents Heal conference, and definitely I want to do that. Yes, and I think I definitely want to be of service. And I'm also a clinical licensed clinical psychologist, so I can also make the distinction between people who may need some professional help and people who are just in the grieving process and anything in between. So yeah, I love we will be in touch about that, and definitely yes,
okay,
it's
I
very
just had to
important.
ask that question because after listening to you and knowing that you help so many people already, it would be wonderful to have you on our list of affiliate leaders so that we can
Yeah,
direct people to you. So
yes,
sorry, Lisa, I didn't want to interrupt, but
No, that's
thank
okay. In
you.
fact,
that's
I was
perfect.
kind of leading up to that, and I was going to say, for those who may know you outside of Helping Parents Heal, and of course, this is a Helping Parents Heal book review, but I know there are some that'll watch this YouTube video and ask themselves, what is this organization? Can you tell us what Helping Parents Heal has been to you?
Yes, sure, I can. Um, well, Suzanne Giesman pointed to Helping Parents Heal as an organization, uh, yeah, for parents with a child who is now across the veil, as they say. And she made it very clear that you're not just simple grief counseling, but you're open to, yeah, to any other way of connecting with children or other people who have passed in spirit. And of course, having that connection already myself and building on that through the courses I took with Suzanne, I had the feeling, well, this is the organization because I think there is really no other way. I mean, you can go, I've seen people go to grief counseling forever, and it doesn't help. I met people like that, at the Helping Parents Heal Conference in August 2024. And I could see some people were just, oh, they were just hurting so badly. And what I find really important is that what you provide is you literally provide healing, not only by, of course, listening to people and bringing people together, but also sharing this knowledge, about, yeah, the afterlife, which isn't really the afterlife. It's just life in another dimension. But for lack of a better word, we'll call it the afterlife. So I mean, the people I met at your conference, from James van Praag to, yeah, Jacob Cooper, Anita Moriani, Suzanne, obviously. I mean, they have such a gift of healing. The way they speak, the love they exude, you're really going to feel like you're not alone in this. And that is so important. I think and I think in a way, you could also say, well, it's called Helping Parents Heal. In one, one, maybe 20 years from now, it's called Helping the World Heal, because I think this knowledge is for everyone, not only for grieving people. It's just so important that we spread this knowledge. And what I also really like is the conference has this mix of like more science-based people like Dr. Gary Schwartz's work, and then there's more experience-based people, and yeah, and different ways of connecting with spirit through meditation or through numerology, through, yeah, all these different ways of connecting people with their soul and their soul's purpose. And yeah, I think that's just beautiful, and that energy at the conference. I'm doing like a whole, cheer for for the conference. I mean, if you have any hesitation, parents who are here, about going there, I would definitely, tell you, please go. It's going to be awesome. And even if you have a lot of people in your own network who are kind of, yeah, have some misgivings about this whole spiritual connection, if you will, yeah, just go, and you'll meet nice people, you meet loving people, and you won't feel so alone anymore.
And of course, Irene and Elizabeth are planning our next conference for August 2026. Please put that on your calendars. And we do have a Helping Parents Heal conference page on Facebook as well. Corinne's book with Julian, written with Julian again, is Tears for a Golden Butterfly. And now I'd like to ask if any of you have any questions while we have Corinne here with us. This has been beautiful, Corinne. Thank you. And thank you, Elizabeth and Lynn, for letting me jump in and co-host this with you.
So one thing I want to say before we go to the questions is that Lisa's husband, Rick, is the photographer at the conference. He's also the videographer, and he does this all on a volunteer basis. And he did a beautiful video of our last conference. And I just feel so grateful to him and to Lisa for taking so much time out of their lives to create these beautiful videos that kind of sum up the conference, for instance, in 26 minutes, which is pretty incredible. And anyway, not that we wanted this to be an advertisement for the conference, but thank you, Lisa, for saying that, because I had to say something about this beautiful video that just came out recently, in fact. So anyway, other than that, yes, let's see if there are any questions for Corine. I see that there are a lot of people talking about the fact that they really enjoy what you're talking about. Deb had to leave early because she was picking up her grandson, Julian, which is pretty.
Yes, I saw that.
And I think that that's off. I wanted to say one thing, that when you were speaking, before you said anything about the butterflies, there was this gold butterfly behind my house that looked like it flew out of where you were speaking from your profile and then flew around, and I was following it with my eyes. So then after that, when you talked about the butterflies, I know that it's a white one that normally you get to see, but I know your book is called Tears for a Golden Butterfly. So anyway, but let's go ahead and look at the questions. Are there any? So Jill wants to ask a question. You maybe we can unmute her. Is that okay? Except
I
we'd love
think
to
I
have your
just
video on.
asked.
Okay. Um, can you hear me?
Can you
Yes,
turn your video on, please?
Yeah, I'm looking for I'm like, okay, where
down on the left side if you hover over the bar there.
I have just like message everybody. This is sort of, wait a minute. I'm so sorry. This is like I don't want to X anything because I'm afraid I'm gonna lose you guys. Everyone, for some reason,
That's okay. Go ahead, Jill.
um, I just want to say, well, I'm really grateful. I saw I tune in. Um, uh, I watched recorded sessions, and thank you very much of helping parents heal. I mean, you speak to my heart and my soul, but I haven't yet been able to come physically to a conference because I'm living in Amsterdam, and it's a little bit hard to get over there. So when I saw that Corine was Dutch, I thought, and Maastricht, and I mean, I just thought, I've never been able to find people here like
Mhm.
the culture here in Europe, it's not as sort of let's be kind and say flourishing as it is in America. We have support groups in America, and I've always counted on that. But here, I really couldn't find sort of a cohort of bereaved parents. I
Mm.
don't even
Yeah,
like that expression, but
I know. Yeah, I know what you mean. There is an organization for which is Dutch. It's called Ouders van een overleden kind. It means
yeah,
parents
I
of.
know, I know. Well,
But
to be honest, we contacted them. Julia transitioned 7 years ago, and and they sort of really don't. They're not that active. And like somebody said, well, once in a while they have something, but I've gotten so much more solace from this group,
yeah, yeah, I understand that. Yeah,
and
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I know what you mean. I also contacted them and I've been to some of their activities, and but they are very which I also really like about this organization is not yeah, like emphasizing how sorry you are for each other, or
exactly,
like this victim
exactly,
perspective. I
exactly,
don't feel that at all. We're proud shining light parents, and
exactly,
we want to share the love for our children, and that is eternal. So I feel that
exactly.
is so important, and that's missing for right now, still at the
Maybe
Dutch
we can
Association.
get it. Like I mean, I've been in grief therapy, but it's all about can you like letting go. I'm not willing to let go. I mean, does that sound I don't
If
want to let go of my daughter. I
if
don't
I can
want
No,
to.
interject, that's what helping parents heal is about. It's
yeah,
about learning that our children are still with us. And
Right.
15 years ago, when Elizabeth co-founded this international movement, I think Lynn and Jeff were some of the first parents. She had maybe six, maybe 12 parents. And what I'm hearing from all of our children, Julian leading the charge today, is if you build it, they will come. And I know there's no coincidence that Jill is on today with Corinne.
Wow.
And I encourage all of us to know, and as our mission statement says, there are many, many grief groups, but our group is different. And I know for myself, having both my children in spirit, that once I learned and recognized that they haven't gone anywhere and that bond is so much closer. It's just as Corinne said, all the things she tried, she so beautifully stated was because she recognized I can have a joyful life. because I recognized I can function, because I recognized everything is okay. Sure, we have those waves, as she described, but it is this group that is so incredibly different. And all of our children took part in the creation of the awakening of this
Yeah.
planet. And that's beautiful. So thank you, Corinne.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa and Lynn and Elizabeth. I can't wait to see you again next year in Arizona, and Ferko is going to join me this time. So that'll be so wonderful.
That'll be wonderful to have you both. Oh my goodness, it was great to meet Furco ahead of time. And also, I just want to say that Lynn is kind of a celebrity because she's in Still Right Here, which is the book that Suzanne Giesemann wrote
Yeah.
after writing Messages of Hope. She'd also written Wolf's Messages as well. But anyway, she's one of the main people in that. And she's also been in our documentary, which is unfortunately not available right now. So we're going to try to get that active again. But it was a documentary that was made with a bunch of Shining Light parents. And again, we don't have to say bereaved, we can say Shining Light parents because
Yeah,
that's what we
yeah.
are, which is so nice. Anyway, I
Uh,
this was beautiful.
it was beautiful, and I really enjoyed this, Corinne. And thank you, Lisa. You guys, and Elizabeth,
Oh,
as always. You're all amazing, and thank you everybody for showing up today.
Thank you. Thank you so
mhm.
much.
And Jill, I'm
Thank you so
excited for
much.
you.
I feel, I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm on, I'm looking for like-minded people because I mean, and I say like it can nobody wants to talk about my Julia. It's like, imagine I mean, people are so hesitant. It's like taboo to talk about our children, and that's just the opposite of what we should be doing. It's
Yeah.
just it's hard. It's hard. And
And
this mission, helping parents heal, has been a godsend for me, really, in the wilderness here. I mean, in the wilderness of my mind also, but I'm so grateful to all of you because you've just opened a door, that uh, that I want to keep walking through. I want to keep going down that path. And your support is just, is so incredibly vital. And I don't think I'm just speaking for myself. I think I'm speaking on behalf of all, parents in this situation
thank you. I
with
just
kids with
wanted to
translation.
say that you said something that was so beautiful in the chat box that won't be shown on this video, which is that we need to continue giving our children a voice, which is exactly right. And because they are giving us so much information, they're sending us so much love, and our lives are so enriched because of them and because of the collateral beauty that they send to us. And I think that your book is such a great illustration of that, Corinne. I think that being able to read about um, being an coming from an academic background, similar to Suzanne coming from a military background, and
Yeah.
being able to find so much hope in the signs that Julian was sending you is beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Ferko, for being here. Can't wait to meet you
Yes.
in person.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for everything. We wouldn't be here
Yes.
without you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh,
Thank you, Corinne.
Yes.
Thank you, Lynn.
And
Thank
I
you
thank
so
am
much
so
for
grateful.
having me,
uh,
and so much love to everyone who attended today, and hope to see you.
And you and Jill have to get together to start this.
Yes,
Jill
we
can
will.
help
We
you do it.
will. Yes.
Okay. We'll talk to
love
you
you
all of you
guys.
soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.